Hi, everyone. This is Grandmaster Ben Feingold making more videos with chess.com. And this is a three-part series called Winning with Opposite Colored Bishops. And for those of you who have seen my videos before, you notice I like to show my own games. And in this series, I'm only going to show one of my games. And I'm going to show two of my favorite opposite colored bishop end games from history that I really enjoy and I try to show all my students. Now, the reason I'm doing this video series is I had a game last week with Sam Sevian, the world under 12 champion. As you can see the position right here, we have opposite colored bishops. The pawns are even, but of course, my bishop on e5 is fantastic outside my pawn chain, and Sam's bishop on c8 is not so good. Now, there's two things I try to do when I play chess. I try to do what I want to do, and I try to stop my opponent from doing what they want to do. And that's not so simple. Now, the last move my opponent made was king e8. Sam decided he's just going to chill out and draw the game with the opposite bishops and not really do anything. Okay, I decided I wanted to move my king. And well, watching this video, you're going to see a lot of king moves, so try not to get too dizzy. The first thing I wanted to do was walk my king up here on the king side, sort of diagonally, and enter this way. So, well, the problem is e3 is weak, and my opponent, Sam, can try to play rook b3 and attack the e3 pawn. So I put a stop to that with the move rook a3, defending my pawn. Now there's nothing really for him to attack, and Sam decided that his g pawn could be attacked in case his king went over to the queen side, blocking his rook. So he played g6. That's not really good for his bishop, because now his bishop is blocked by all of its pawns. But he thought I couldn't attack anything, so I couldn't win. Well, now marching my king up on the king side makes sense because I have some entry squares. So I played king h2, and Sam didn't do anything. He just moved his king back and forth. And once he saw king g5 was coming, he prevented it with the move h6. Okay, now the problem is h6 is not defended, so I can try to attack it, which I was luckily able to do soon. So first I repeated moves because we're playing with a 30-second increment and I want to get more time on my clock. And Sam didn't repeat. He decided to move his bishop back and forth between e8 and d7 because the only undefended pawn in his position is the c6 pawn. His king is defending his other two pawns. So he thought this would be an easy draw, bishop e8, bishop to d7. Okay, so I played king to g3, and my idea was to go to the queen side. I wanted to attack the h pawn, but again, if I play something like rook a8 and rook h8 to attack the pawn, I'm leaving e3 undefended again. So watch my plan. I move my king over to stop his rook. I play rook a2, so my king can go to f2 and he can't check me. And then we walk over to c2. And Sam is content just moving his bishop back and forth. Okay, now I've stopped all of the entry squares for the black rook. So now I can do my plan. Rook to a8. I want to play rook to h8, attacking the pawn. And Sam's like, no, you can't attack my pawn, bishop e8. But now the black king is overloaded, defending g7 and e8. So I can attack the g pawn. And I think this rook and pawn is pretty easily winning. If he takes my bishop and I take his bishop, I'm threatening this pawn. If he protects it, oh, let's say king f6, then I would go win his c pawn and I have a passed c pawn. Should be a pretty easy win, I would think. And Sam agreed. So instead of taking my bishop, he played the move I wanted him to play, h5. And when I was a younger man, I remember seeing a Karpov game where he moved his king back and forth, both sides of the board, trying to enter with his king. Well, if you remember earlier, my king was on h4, and I was trying to play king g5, but he wouldn't let me. He played h6. Well, now his pawn's not on h6, so now it's time to go back. Of course, if my king goes to the king side, his rook can infiltrate everywhere. So I decided I wanted to block his rook so he couldn't infiltrate. And the only way to block his rook is to play bishop to b6. So my next plan was to play bishop b6 and then walk my king all the way over here to g5. Okay, and I was able to eventually play my plan, bishop h6, bishop g5, I'm going to d8. And I did. And now I walked my king over to the king side. He tried to infiltrate, but I stopped him. Okay. And now I thought he wanted to play g5. So I played bishop d8, but then he tried to move his rook over and infiltrate again. And now I decided if I wanted to play king g3 to h4, he would get in g5 first. So now I changed my mind again. I decided since my bishop was on b6, I would infiltrate with my king on the queen side. However, I don't want him to play g5 and get counterplay. Then his bishop and his rook could get active. So I played h4. So I've totally blocked up the position. My rook is better than his rook. My bishop's better than his bishop. And soon my king will be better. And I walked my king back over to the queen side. And he just has no counterplay. Now, I like this move g3 because eventually he might get frustrated and try to sacrifice pawns and move his king up or get his bishop active. So with the move g3, I sort of solidify the defense of the king side. I could actually ignore g5 if I wanted to, but I would probably take it, and I'm stopping his other pawns from moving with g3. So he keeps just doing nothing, basically. And now his rook is blocking his bishop, so I can attack the c pawn, which I did, and rook d5. Well, he's got two choices. I don't want to call it a Sophie's choice. It's probably not that important. But if he plays rook to b7, so his bishop defends his c pawn, then king to a6 looks pretty scary. His rook really has nowhere to go, and it's really hard to defend the c6 pawn. And he realized that, and he was like, well, I'll just play rook to d5, and my bishop is defending both of my weak pawns. How could white possibly win? The problem is I can try to trap his rook, and I did with bishop c7. Now I'm going to play bishop d6 check, and his rook is just entombed on d5, and I can saunter in here and win pretty easily. A normal winning plan is actually to sacrifice the exchange. Let me give you an example. Let's say that black doesn't do anything, which actually isn't so easy. It's not easy to do nothing, but I'll try. We'll trap the rook, and then we'll try to do nothing. Now, I'm probably going to win by sacrificing the exchange. And then I'll just take this pawn on c6. And the c pawn is really difficult to stop. It's going to promote, and the rook on d5 just doesn't play at all. That's the main way that I would try to win. Now, my opponent, Sam, he played king to d7. He's trying to get some tactics going because, I mean, he's basically trapped. His bishop can't move. And in opposite colored bishop endgames, you actually don't want to put the pawns on the same color as your bishop to defend them because then your bishop isn't active. Now, I'm sort of lucky in this regard because my bishop is outside the pawn chain. My pawns are all in one color, but my bishop isn't on g1 or h2. It's outside the pawns on the other side of the board, so my bishop is actually very active. Sam's bishop, well, it never really left the first two rows, and it had nowhere to go. So it's sort of funny. Neither one of us wants to put our pawns on the color of our bishop, but it's more effective if I do it because my bishop's outside the pawn chain, and that stops his pawns from moving. So his bishop is just terrible, and I play rook a8 because I know the rook and pawn ending is winning, and if he doesn't play the rook and pawn ending, I'm just going to play bishop d6, and his rook is trapped. So he did trade bishops. And this is a fairly easy win because he has three pawns that I could potentially capture, and there's nothing he can really do about it. He defended his pawn, of course, king to d7, and I played rook g8, winning a pawn. But I decided that pawn wasn't so important. I can't really make a passed pawn taking it. But if I could take the c6 pawn, then I would win very quickly. So I played rook check. Again, Sam has a tough decision. Does he play king f6 and let me take the c6 pawn? Or does he play king d8 and stop me from taking the c6 pawn? Well, he chose king d8. Once again, I don't really care about this pawn on g6. I play king a5. I'm trying to win the c6 pawn. And the king and pawn endgame should be a very easy win. And he's in zugzwang now. I could move my king back and forth if I had to, although I don't have to because he doesn't have any pawn moves. So he has to give up this pawn right away. And that's actually very similar to the game, unfortunately for Sam. Sam didn't want to trade rooks. He played king e8. Again, I kept infiltrating, king to b6, king to f8. I don't really care about this pawn. I just want to keep his king tied down. So rook h7. He can't move his rook. If he plays rook to d8, rook h8 check wins. So he attacked my rook, rook to e7, and I just take all the pawns. And most people would resign here. Although, to be honest with you, I don't like resigning. So I'm one of the few grandmasters. If you play on against me in incredibly hopeless position, I don't really mind. I'm not a big fan of resigning. I tell my students not to resign, play for stalemate, hope your opponent blunders. You can't win by resigning. You can't draw by resigning. And a lot of my friends and colleagues I showed this game to, they were totally shocked that Sam kept playing on, even when he was a queen down later. But I'm not really surprised. I understand being frustrated and playing on a few extra moves. Some of my friends aren't so forgiving. But okay, king f8, and I start mopping up, taking everything. His rook's trapped. The king and pawn ending is an easy win. Yeah, now he got a little silly. This could be easily resigned. He played g5. But again, I don't blame people for not resigning. Chess is a hard game, sort of frustrated at the end. And it was very frustrating for Sam because the bishop that started on c8, it never really got anywhere. He was always behind his pawn chain. And I can't stress enough, in opposite colored bishop endgames, you want to put your pawns on your opponent's color of the bishop, not on your own color. And because his bishop was behind the pawn chain, he never could move his bishop. I guess he was happy when he traded bishops, even though that was more losing. Okay, and then it got a little silly. And okay, eventually Sam resigned here. But the lesson to be learned is when your opponent does have pawns on the same color as their bishop and their bishop can't move, you want to fix the pawns. So even though my pawns are on the same color, they stopped his pawns from moving and he couldn't activate his bishop. I was actually waiting for him to sacrifice a pawn. I thought he would play e5 or g5 and try to get some active play, but he never really did that. And because of that, by just trying to draw by doing nothing, my king was able to infiltrate. So in rook and opposite colored bishop endings, you want to have the better bishop and you want your king to move up the board. My king moved up, Sam stayed where it was. And as you can see, I had a winning king and pawn ending because my king was better than his. So that was a very interesting endgame for me. And when I play players who were very young, under the age of 21, let's say, I know they like opening theory and tactics, and they like really lots of complications, and they don't like boring endgames. But I'm an old guy. I've played a lot of endgames, and I've bored a lot of people into submission. So I was very happy to get that kind of position where I'm trying to make sure my opponent can't move and dominate their bishop. And against a younger player, that's a good way to play because I know Sam is going to out-tactic me. And if we have to do calculation, that's not going to be good for me. Well, I hope you liked the first video in this series of winning with opposite colored bishops. The next two videos in this series don't feature any other pieces. This was a rook and bishop ending. The next ones are pure bishop endgames, which normally are drawn, but there's some very exciting ways to win sometimes. This is Grandmaster Ben Feingold reporting to you from chess.com.